Hal Brenner started every morning in the same way. He would wake up before the lights of Orbital Station Warden 7 turned on. He would walk quietly to the kitchen, tie his old brown apron, and begin preparing breakfast for over 300 humans and aliens aboard the station. Most didn't even know his full name. To them, he was just the cook. He didn't mind. Hal liked the quiet. He liked the smell of brewing coffee, the sound of water boiling, and the peaceful hum of machines before the day began. While others on the station dealt with politics, science, trade routes, and ship repairs, Hal just made sure no one ever went hungry. But Hal was more than just a cook. Nobody knew it, not the captain, not the engineers, not even the curious. Alien intern who always asked too many questions. Hal had secrets, not dangerous ones, not dark ones. Just old truths that no one ever asked about. He had once helped build this station. Years ago, Hal was an engineer, not a famous one, but good. Enough to be part of the team that designed parts of Warden 7's life support systems, backup power grids, and service tunnels. He had memorized almost every corner of the station, even the ones no one used anymore, after a war he never liked, and a promotion he never wanted. Hal walked away from that life. He didn't want medals. He didn't want to fight. He just wanted to be useful in a quiet way, so he asked for a kitchen job. No one questioned it. After all, who wants to argue with someone volunteering to cook 3 meals a day for over 300 people? Still, Hal never forgot how the station worked. Every evening after dinner, when the last plate was clean, he would disappear into the forgotten parts of Warden 7 old cargo bays, silent hallways, dusty control panels. He repaired things no one noticed: broken wiring, cracked coolant pipes, rusty maintenance droids. He never told anyone. He never asked for thanks to the crew. Hal was just the man who made the best protein stew on the outer rim. To himself, he was just keeping the place alive. People liked Hal. He remembered birthdays. He asked how your shift went. He gave second servings without asking. He listened. Even the grumpy Vascan dockworker once smiled when Hal handed him extra bread. But no one really looked at Hal. That was fine with him. Then one morning, everything changed. It started with a strange silence. Hal had just poured a fresh cup of Terran. Black coffee when the lights flickered. Not just in the kitchen, but everywhere. The usual hum of the air system stopped. A deep, low thud echoed through the walls. Then the station went dark. For a few seconds it was completely silent. Then came the alarms. Red emergency lights flashed. Voices shouted over the intercom, but they were broken and filled with static. The ground shook. Somewhere a power relay exploded. The main AI went offline. Hal stood still, holding his coffee. He closed his eyes. He knew this wasn't a simple malfunction. Warden 7 had been hit by something big. The crew didn't know what to do. Officers ran in different directions, trying to find out what was happening. Power was down. Communication was failing. Some areas of the station were sealed. Others were losing air. People panicked, but Hal didn't. He finished his coffee quietly, put on his apron again, and picked up the small toolkit he kept under the kitchen counter. "Looks like it's time," he said softly to himself. Hal walked out of the kitchen, not to the main halls, but to a service ladder hidden behind a supply shelf. He climbed into the maintenance tunnels that ran like veins through the station. No one had used them in years, but Hal had kept them clean and safe. As he moved through the shadows, he passed silent machines and flickering lights. In the distance, he could hear metal creaking. The station had taken a hit, maybe from a solar flare, maybe from something worse. He didn't know yet, but he would find out. He reached the first emergency panel and opened it. Dead. The second, still no power, but Hal didn't panic. He knew the systems. He knew their backup paths. He had drawn them himself long ago. He reached a third panel, opened it, and flipped 3 small switches. Lights in the hallway flickered to life. Not all of them, but enough to show that life support was restarting in Sector 3. Hal smiled. That's a start. Back in the main halls, people noticed the lights. Air systems hummed again in some places. Confused officers asked who did it. No one knew. The cook was forgotten for now, but Hal kept going. He moved fast, quiet, and calm. He avoided damaged areas. He reached hidden control nodes and restarted power in sections one by one. He sent small messages through old maintenance comms, telling trapped workers how to escape locked rooms. He didn't wait for thanks. He didn't stop. The man everyone thought was just a cook was already saving the station, and he was only getting started. The power on Warden 7 didn't just blink, it died. Across the massive space station, lights shut off like falling dominoes. One by one, doors sealed with hard metallic clicks. Vents stopped pushing fresh air, monitors went black. Even the gravity flickered in some areas. People stumbled, gasped, and clung to handrails as their world suddenly fell silent. Panic spread fast. In the control tower, officers shouted over each other. The main systems weren't responding. Backup power wasn't kicking in, communications were down. No one could contact nearby ships. The usual calm voice of the station's AI, Sarah, had gone completely silent. All over the station, people ran through halls trying to find answers. Some were stuck in elevators. Others were locked inside labs or maintenance bays. Everyone asked the same question: what happened? No one had answers. Except maybe one person. Hal Brenner wasn't in the chaos. He was already deep inside the forgotten parts of the station, moving like he had done it 100 times before. In a way, he had. Crawling through the narrow service tunnels, Hal stayed focused. He knew the pulse that hit the station wasn't natural. It was too sharp, too sudden. It wasn't a power failure. It was an attack or a test. The outer defense shields hadn't fired, which meant the station had been hit before it could react. That shouldn't have been possible unless someone knew exactly how to bypass Warden 7's sensors. Hal didn't have time to guess who was behind it. His job now was simple: keep the crew alive. Get the station breathing again. He reached Junction 9B, a forgotten control room behind the hydro deck. Most people didn't even know it existed. The dust on the console was thick, but Hal had wiped it clean just a week ago, just in case. He placed his hand on the old biometric scanner. It flashed red. Of course, Hal muttered. They wiped the system. He pulled out a tiny tool from his belt pouch, unscrewed the cover, and quickly rewired the old circuit inside. The light turned green. Still got it, he said with a grin. Within moments, he brought emergency oxygen online in sectors 4 through 6. He opened 4 sealed airlocks manually, allowing trapped crew members to escape. In another hallway, a family of alien visitors, 3 adults and a small child, saw the doors suddenly slide open and rushed into safety. They didn't know who had done it. Hal didn't wait for anyone to find out. Back near the central mess hall, a young technician named Relo, only 19 and fresh out of academy training, sat in the dark holding a flickering datapad. His captain had ordered him to monitor the emergency relays, but none of them were responding. Then, suddenly, one screen blinked. Just one. A quiet message appeared. Power rerouted. Sector 7 oxygen stable. Do not panic. Continue breathing normally. Relo's eyes widened. Who sent this? He looked around, but the room was empty. He tapped the console again. A second message appeared. Cook. In the officers' lounge, Commander Telra was arguing with her deputy. We need to find the source of this system blackout now, she snapped. If this is a sabotage attempt, we're sitting ducks. But ma'am, the deputy said, some sectors are coming back online. We're seeing life support restore itself. Telra narrowed her eyes. How? We didn't send any teams out yet. Then a call came in one of the few working communication channels. Commander, this is Doc Crew Alpha. Sector 3 just regained partial gravity. Life support is back too. We don't know how? Telra stood still for a moment. Someone was doing something. And it wasn't her officers. Far below, in the engine crawl spaces, Hal ducked under low pipes and moved through thin corridors with ease. He had rewired most of these systems in secret years ago. The station had cut funding for them, called them low priority. He had fixed them anyway, quietly, patiently. He reached a backup relay node and reprogrammed it to start rerouting emergency power across the grid. It would take time, but it would work if no one shut it down. The station was slowly coming back to life. Hal paused to catch his breath. The air was thin here, but it was better than it had been 10 minutes ago. He sipped from a small water tube and leaned against the wall. For a moment, he thought about the life he had left behind. The medals, the battles, the failures. He had come here to forget all that. He had come here to cook. But now the station needed more than food. It needed him. Suddenly, he heard footsteps in the tunnel behind him. He turned and saw a young woman. In an engineering suit. Relo's friend, Shira, her helmet light caught him in surprise. "Wait. Hal?" she asked. "What are you doing here?" Hal gave a soft smile. "Fixing dinner," Shira blinked. "What?" he chuckled. "Well, power first, then dinner. But how do you even know where all these systems are?" Hal gave her a tired look. "Because I helped build this place. A long time ago, before I became the cook." Shira stared at him. "You're the one restoring power?" Hal nodded. I think people need to know," she said. "Not yet," Hal replied. "There's still a lot left to do." The lights were coming back slowly. Air pressure was stabilizing. The worst parts of the blackout were over. For now, but the crew of Warden 7 was still confused and scared. Captain Telra stared at the slowly flickering screens in the command center. Power levels were returning in small sections, as if someone were restoring the station room by room. But she hadn't given those orders. None of her engineers had. "Find out who's doing this," she said firmly. "I want names." Now, somewhere below the command deck, Hal Brenner stepped out of a narrow tunnel covered in dust. His apron was torn at one side, and his hands were black from old cables and soot. He looked tired, but his eyes were calm. He had just restored energy to the food storage rooms and water circulation pipes. If the station was going to survive, people needed food, air, and hope. And maybe coffee. He walked into the mess hall, which was empty and quiet. The long tables were still in place, and the emergency lights glowed red above them. He made his way to the counter and checked the backup power panel behind the kitchen wall, still working. Good. Then he heard footsteps behind him. It was Shira again, the young engineer he'd met earlier in the maintenance shaft. This time she wasn't alone. A small group of officers and 2 senior engineers were with her. They stopped when they saw him standing in the kitchen with a wrench in one hand and grease on his face. "You're the cook?" one officer asked. Hal nodded. "Still am." "But you restored power to 7 sectors, Shira said, stepping forward. "You reprogrammed an old relay node without access codes." "That's not normal," Hal gave a small smile. "I didn't say I was normal," the senior engineer frowned. "Who are you really?" Hal looked around the kitchen. He saw the old photos on the wall, the chart where he marked birthdays, the pot he used for stew every week. Then he took a breath and said, "I'm Hal Brenner. I was one of the early techs who helped build Warden 7, back when it was just a skeleton in orbit. I helped design its emergency systems, backup pathways, and maintenance droids." Silence filled the room. "After the war ended, I walked away from my post. I didn't want another title. Didn't want to be saluted. I just wanted peace." "You never told anyone?" Shira asked. "No one asked," Hal replied. "And I preferred it that way." The officers exchanged glances. "You saved lives today," the senior engineer said quietly. "We were losing control." "If you hadn't stepped in, I didn't do it to be thanked," Hal said, cutting in gently. "I just did what needed doing," the officer nodded. "Still, we need you now. More than ever." Hal's face turned serious. "The blackout wasn't random. Someone disabled the main grid in a way that bypassed every alarm. That means it was intentional, precise. Sabotage?" Shira asked, eyes wide. "Maybe," Hal said. "Or worse." He pulled a small device from his pocket, a handheld diagnostic scanner. It wasn't standard issue anymore, but Hal had kept his. He tapped the screen and pulled up a signal log. "This was the pulse that knocked out our systems." I caught the signature just before the AI died. "It's not a solar flare. It came from deep space, and it's coded." The officers leaned closer. The scan showed a wave signal with strange data spikes. "What does it mean?" the engineer asked. "It means someone sent that pulse on purpose," Hal said. "And it wasn't just to shut us down. It also sent something else, a call, a signal. Something went out as soon as our shields dropped? Out? Shira echoed. To who? Hal shook his head. I don't know, but I intend to find out. They stood there for a moment, letting it all sink in. The station hadn't just had an accident. It had been targeted. Finally, Captain Telra's voice came through the intercom. Someone had managed to get a signal. Channel working again. All officers report to command. Emergency session. All station crew remain in assigned sectors. This is not a drill. The officers in the mess hall turned to go. But one stopped and looked at Hal. You're coming with us, he said. Hal raised an eyebrow. Since when? Does the cook get invited to command meetings? Since the cook knows more about this station than the whole crew combined. Hal sighed, untied his apron slowly, and hung it on the wall hook beside his station. Then he grabbed his toolkit. All right, he said, let's go. As they walked, Shira asked him, why didn't you ever tell anyone who you were? Hal looked down the hallway ahead, lights flickering softly as power returned sector by sector. Because, he said simply, titles don't keep people alive. Knowing what to do and doing it quietly, that's what matters. I was never trying. To be a hero? She smiled slightly. Well, it might be too late for that. They reached the lift, which now had just enough power to carry them upward. Hal stepped inside, toolkit in hand, eyes focused. The cook had become something more. Not because he wanted to, but because no one else could, and deep down he knew the worst was still coming. The command room of Warden 7 was colder than usual. Not because of a system failure, but because everyone inside was quiet. Worried, waiting, screens flickered weakly with low power. Reports blinked in and out. Officers whispered among themselves. No one wanted to say it out loud, but they all felt it. Something dangerous was coming. Hal Brenner stood at the back, away from the center table. He still wore his tool pouch. His boots were dusty. His hands were black from cable grease. A few people stared. Some still didn't believe this quiet cook had saved half the station already, but Captain Telra believed. And she listened. So, you're saying the energy pulse wasn't just a system hit, she said, turning toward Hal. It was a message. Hal nodded. It had two parts. The first part disabled us. The second part went out. It told someone or something that Warden 7 was open and unprotected. Do we know where the signal went? Telra asked. Hal tapped a small pad and pulled up a map. A small red line stretched far into deep space. Not exactly. But it didn't go to Earth. It went beyond the known border, and now... He paused. Commander. Telra frowned. Now what? Now something is coming toward us, Hal said. Fast? I don't know what it is. But the station will not survive another hit in this condition. No one spoke. Then one of the junior officers said, Should we evacuate? Telra shook her head. Escape pods won't go far. No nearby ships. And if we scatter into space? We're helpless. We're already helpless, someone else muttered. No, Hal said softly. We're not. Everyone turned. Hal stepped forward slowly. His voice was calm, but firm. This station still works, not perfectly. But it has parts most of you forgot, systems nobody uses anymore. I kept them alive for years, quietly. They're old, yes. But they're still strong. You mean the emergency backups? Telra asked. And more, Hal said. There are shield layers under the main armor, fuel cells and storage you never logged. Bots I've reactivated, repaired, and hidden in. Low zones. I never knew why I kept fixing everything. I just couldn't stop. Shira, the young engineer, stepped beside him. He's telling the truth. I've seen it. Hal's been restoring systems by hand. He knows the station better than anyone. Telra looked at the crew. We don't have time for ego. We don't have time for doubts. If we trust him, we might survive. And if we don't? Someone asked. Then we sit here and wait for something to crush us. Telra said, Silence. Again. Then Hal smiled. I never liked sitting still anyway. For the next 2 hours, the crew of Warden 7 worked together in a way they never had before. Not as ranks, not as humans and aliens, just as people trying to survive. And Hal led them. Not with loud orders, But with quiet action, he split the station into 5 zones and gave each a goal: restore 1 critical function. Power, shields, water, internal sensors, and emergency nav. Hal made the plans and showed them the shortcuts. Every corner of the station he'd ever fixed now became a part of the defense. In Zone 3, a mechanic used an old cargo hauler's engine to jump-start a backup shield array. In Zone 5, a team of scientists turned old food containers into temporary signal reflectors. In the mess hall, volunteers set up an emergency communication relay. Powered by the coffee machine's heating coils, one young alien technician from the Andari species looked at Hal while holding wires together with trembling hands. "You humans do things strangely," Hal chuckled. "We do what we can with what we've got, and if it fails, then we try something else." The alien blinked. "You don't give up easily, do you?" Hal shook his head. "No, we don't." At last, the signal sensors came back online. Hal stared at the screen. One single object was coming closer, silent, big, fast, too fast for comfort. They had maybe 40 minutes. Till Ra turned to Hal. "If this thing attacks, what do we do?" Hal looked around. He saw tired eyes, dirty hands, nervous breaths. But he also saw something else: hope. The kind that only comes when people fight together. He turned back to Telra. "We don't attack back. We confuse it, distract it, use what we know. This isn't about force, it's about outsmarting whatever's out there." Telra nodded. "And if it doesn't fall for that?" Hal gave a small smile. "Then we buy enough time for the distress signal to reach someone who can help." 30 minutes later, the ship appeared. It wasn't a battleship. It wasn't a known design. It floated silently like a hunter waiting in the dark. No flags, no signal. Just silent movement toward Warden-7. Inside the command room, everyone watched. And then it stopped, right outside their shield edge. Shira whispered, "Did we do it?" Hal's eyes narrowed. "Not yet." They waited. Seconds passed like hours. Then the ship blinked once with white light, then disappeared. Gone in an instant. No trace. No damage, no word. Gone. Back on Warden-7. People stood in silence. Tel Ra sat down slowly. "Did we win?" Hal didn't answer. Right away, he looked at the flickering console. Then at the tired crew around him, people from different worlds, different pasts, all standing together. He finally said, "We didn't win. We endured. That's enough for now." And in the mess hall, where power was still weak and the air still smelled like burnt wires, someone turned on the small music player near the food counter. The sound was soft. Human jazz, old, familiar. Hal smiled and walked back behind the kitchen. "Let's get lunch started," he said. Warden-7 should have been a broken station after the strange signal hit, after systems went dark, after the unknown ship came and left. It should have fallen apart. But it did. In single quotes. Thanks to a cook, the crew didn't know what that silent ship was or why it had left, but it had tested them, watched them, and maybe it had judged them. Now the station was quiet again, but not in fear. This time it was the calm that comes after surviving something no one expected. The crew had come. Together, lights were returning, systems were being restored. Oxygen levels were stable in all sectors, and Hal Brenner? He was back in the mess hall, making soup. Yes, soup. Because even after saving the station, he still believed in simple things. Warm food, clean water, a place to sit and breathe. Around him, the crew came in slowly, one group at a time. Dirty, tired, hungry but alive. One alien child sat at the edge of a table, staring at Hal with wide green eyes. "Is it true?" she asked. "You saved everyone?" Hal ladled soup into a bowl and smiled. "I just kept the lights on, little one." "But they said you fixed the shields and fooled the ship," Hal chuckled. "That took everyone, not just me. But you're not even a captain." Hal set the bowl down gently. "You don't need a rank to care about people." The child smiled. In the command room, Commander Telra stood at the central table, reviewing logs. Engineers were still mapping the full damage. Life support had survived, but barely. Some outer modules were burned out, Docking arms were offline. The station's AI was still quiet, yet something strange had happened. Hal's emergency systems, his secret repairs, had lasted longer than the official ones. The shield relays he'd fixed with spare parts worked better than the main array. She shook her head in wonder. He had done all this without asking. For permission, without waiting to be noticed, she opened the station log and typed, "Warden 7 still stands." Not because of command, but because of community. One man, listed only as head cook, restored more systems than our entire team. His name is Hal Brenner. He may not wear a badge, but he showed us what true leadership looks like. She paused, then added, "From this day forward, every crew member, human or alien, should know this truth. You don't need to carry a weapon to defend your home. Sometimes one pair of hands, one open heart, and a little quiet work can save everyone." She pressed save elsewhere on the station. Shira and Rilo were fixing a broken drone in the recycling bay. They laughed as it tried to fly in circles. "I still can't believe Hal did all that," Rilo said. "I thought he just made grilled sandwiches." "He does," Shira said. "Still the best on the station. But he also tricked a deep space threat into backing off. He just used what he knew. That's the human way." "Are all humans like that?" Shira smiled. "The good ones." Later that evening, Hal sat alone in the garden room, where artificial plants grew under soft lights. It was one of the few places on the station that still felt peaceful. Captain Telra entered quietly and sat next to him. "I read your file," she said. Hal didn't look at her. "Most of it's probably deleted. Some things survive." They sat in silence for a moment. "You know," she continued, "when I first met you, I thought, why does a man with war medals work in a kitchen?" Hal finally looked at her. "And now?" he asked. "I think maybe that's where he was always most useful." Hal gave a small smile. "You brought this crew together," she said, "without orders, without command, just by being here." "I just wanted peace," Hal said quietly. "You gave peace. And hope." Then she stood up and looked at the stars through the window. "I've sent a signal to Earth. Told them everything." "You'll probably get a promotion," Hal shook his head. "I don't want one." "Then what do you want?" He thought for a moment. "Just better kitchen knives," he said with a grin. She laughed. "Done." 3 days passed. The station slowly healed. Crews repaired the broken arms. The AI came back online, quiet but steady. Ships began sending messages again. Help was on the way. But something had changed inside Warden 7. It wasn't just a space station anymore. It was a symbol, a place where a cook became a leader, where humans and aliens worked side by side not because of orders but because of trust. And Hal. He stayed in the kitchen, he made breakfast for the engineering team, he shared stories with young cadets. He rebuilt the old coffee machine by hand, and every day someone new came to sit with him. Not to ask for food, but for guidance. He never gave long speeches. He just listened, and maybe that was what the crew needed most. One quiet night, the alien child returned to the kitchen again. "Mr. Cook?" she asked. "Yes?" "Why didn't you run when the power went out?" Hal looked out the small window at the stars. "Because someone had to stay," he said softly. "And I knew the way through the dark." She nodded like she understood. Hal handed her a warm cup of broth. "Here," he said. "Every hero needs soup." Warden 7 was fully alive again. The lights stayed on. The air was fresh, gravity was stable, the spoke calmly. Docking systems were working. Ships started visiting again. Cargo flowed. Messages came from Earth and nearby planets. The blackout was over, but something else had changed, something inside the people. They had faced a silent threat. They had nearly fallen. But they had survived, not because of weapons. Not because of orders, because of a cook. Hal Brenner still started his mornings the same way. He woke up before everyone else, tied his apron, and warmed water for coffee. He chopped vegetables slowly. He baked fresh bread with steady hands. He cleaned the mess hall before anyone arrived. It was peaceful again, but it wasn't quiet anymore. Every day. Crew members came in early. They sat at tables with tired eyes and quiet smiles. They waited for food, but also for Hal. He never acted like a hero. He never told the full story, but people told it for him. He fixed the oxygen with a butter knife. One technician said that no, he tricked that enemy ship by reprogramming kitchen droids. Said another. Someone else added, I heard he built the station with his own hands, then became a cook just to keep an eye on it. Hal would just laugh softly whenever he heard these stories. I just made soup, he'd say, but no one believed. That any more. In the command center, Captain Telra looked over a new report from Earth. It said Warden 7 would receive a full upgrade within 3 months. Stronger shields, faster comms, better defenses, and a special note had been added at the end. Promote Hal Brenner to Chief Station Officer. Medal recommendation pending. She smiled and shook her head. Hal wouldn't want that. He didn't care about ranks. She closed the report and walked to the mess hall. Inside, Hal was serving lunch to a pair of Vascan traders. I added extra spice, he told them. Don't blame me if your tongues go numb, the Vascans laughed. We like the pain, Captain Telra approached. May I sit? She asked. Hal gestured to the stool next to him. Only if you're hungry. She took a bite of the stew and raised an eyebrow. You're still saving lives with this soup, Hal smiled. One bowl at a time. They ate in silence for a while. Around them, the crew laughed and shared stories. The mess hall felt more like a home now. Then she said, You know there's a statue being made? Hal nearly choked. A what? A statue, she said again. Of you, standing with your apron and tool belt. Holding a soup ladle like a sword. Hal covered his face. Oh, no, she laughed. Too late. It's being 3D printed in the main lobby. People from across the sector will see it. I'm never walking through that lobby again, he muttered. That night, after everyone had gone to sleep, Hal sat alone in the mess hall. The lights were dim. A cleaning bot hummed quietly in the corner. He sipped the last of the tea he'd brewed. Then he heard soft footsteps. It was the alien child again, the same one from before. She carried a small tablet. I made something, she said. Hal raised an eyebrow. Let's see it. She turned the screen toward him. It was a simple drawing, a cartoon version of Hal, standing in the kitchen, surrounded by smiling crew members from different species. Above him it said, Our light in the dark. Hal looked at it for a long time, then said softly, That's the nicest thing anyone's ever made for me. You saved us, she whispered. He nodded. But you all saved each other too. She handed him the tablet. It's yours now. Hal looked down at the drawing one more time. Then he set it gently on the wall near the serving counter, right between a photo of Earth and the crew schedule. Perfect spot, he said. In the following days, the legend of Hal spread beyond Warden-7. Other stations sent messages. We want to meet the cook who saved a whole crew. Can you share your repair diagrams? Would he visit our training center? But Hal never left the station. He stayed where he was needed. And yet, his story traveled without him. Young engineers told his tale during training. Alien children drew pictures of him. Pilots whispered about the human cook who made food during a blackout and quietly brought a station back from the edge. Even soldiers repeated his name when things looked grim. Back on Warden 7, the kitchen lights glowed. Warm. Hal Brenner stirred soup slowly. Behind him, the station hummed with life. He didn't wear medals. He didn't command anyone. But when someone was afraid, they came to him. When someone was tired, they sat near him. When someone was lost, he reminded them who they were. A hero. They said. Hal just smiled. I'm still just a cook, he'd reply. But deep down, he knew sometimes being just a cook is exactly what the world needs.